This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and last episode on Friday, I talked about rules and how when I actually first was taught that there are no rules, it really changed a whole perspective for me for a whole range of things. It's funny, I'm in course at the moment, and one of the things that we're talking about is frames, and frames could be like, all dog owners are aggressive, or all staffies are aggressive. There you go. It could be, men are bad. Men with hats are bad drivers. These are all frames, but they're actually also beliefs or rules. And this is the thing about it, is that a lot of the time we'll go external behavior, including ourselves, equals an internal state. So that equals that. That's usually what a rule is on some degree. And being in a space where we can actually remove these frames and see these rules for what they are, that they're just simply rules that we have agreed to. They're just frames that we agreed to. None of them actually, a lot of them aren't resourceful anymore. That's one. But two, the other thing about it is that it does not mean that the way that we perceive the world is actually the way that it should be perceived. At some point, like for example, I remember being told to pay rent first, right? And that was something that I was told growing up. Now, it's not bad advice for like a 17-year-old, 18, 19, 20-year-old, 22-year-old. It's like, buddy, you got to pay rent. And I wasn't probably earning very much money at that stage, so to make sure that I did pay rent rather than buy on alcohol or meals out or sporting goods or whatever it was, probably not bad advice. But unfortunately, at some point, that advice stops being good, right? And so the question is like, what point do I then get rid of this bit of advice? So what's worth noting is that that's just an example, and then we got to look at the frames that we and the rules that we agreed to for ourselves around being embarrassed around things, or around self-worth, or around money, or around love, conditions, all this sort of stuff, all these rules, all these frames, all these beliefs, and go firstly, like, when did I first come up with this? And a lot of the time you might find that that person came up with that at such a young age. It's like, how could that person possibly know more than you right now? And also, does this belief, does it uphold in other areas of your life? Is it true for other people? Like, these are all valid questions to look at and to pull apart, because all of a sudden we start to see that these beliefs, these rules that we have for our life, are simply rules that we've just agreed to. Like, they're not actually law. That law is very different, but even then, that's another construct. But either way. And so just observing this and going, hang on a sec, so these rules could be anything. These frames could be anything, right? Because we know that not all men with hats are bad drivers all the time, everywhere. It can't possibly be true. We know that not all staffies are actually aggressive dogs. In fact, mostly they're big sooks that just want pats, right? So it's so interesting that we start to look at this, global or general, you can call it, but these rules, these frames that we have agreed to, and a lot of the time then we agreed to them, or came to that conclusion at such a young age, that we now at an older age still hold this belief that just simply no longer serves us. In fact, it does the opposite. And it's really interesting to see it in a corporate space, in a relationship, in a health and fitness space. The belief of like, well, I'm always just going to be a little bit overweight, right? That's just like a subconscious thing in the back of the mind that people don't realize. It's like they might remember a time where their parents were just like somewhat just ragging on fitter and healthier people and saying that like that's not real, You know, what's real is whatever. Well, you know, what's real is everyone's going to be a little bit overweight or something. And you heard that when you were 12. And because of that, you've kept this in the back of your mind that you want to be approved by your parents, because we do want to seek approval from the authoritative figure, and we do seek love from the nurturing figure, right? And so what's interesting around this is that if we aren't taught that to have that ourselves, then we're still sort of banging our head into this program that we go, right, we have this sort of belief in the background going, well, if I end up losing weight, then I won't be loved by the people that I want love from the most, where in reality the person is simply just not loving themselves, right? Because they're searching for an external love, which is presupposing they don't have an internal. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have external love, or we shouldn't accept it, or we shouldn't look for it necessarily. It's more so is a condition based off this lack of internal love, because it's quite fascinating. And it was interesting because one of the frames that I brought up and talked about was like I would have this internal consult to make sure that I was safe. And so what that meant was, and something that I became really aware of, was this, like, I was really good, and I am really good at internally referencing and going, well, what do I think about this? What do I feel about this? Hence why I really enjoy pulling apart my thoughts and sharing them, right? And then there's also this certain level of internal authority. It's like, if I don't want to do something, I'm just not going to do it. If I don't like you, I'll probably tell you. Like, it's just no problem doing that sort of stuff. And sometimes to my detriment, obviously. And what I recognized that was all linked back to survival. And so certain parts of my youth was actually quite hostile. And so I would be checking in and going, hang on a sec, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be safe here? What do I need to do? And because of that, I kind of half developed also this quite aggressive sort of part of me, which still is useful to today if I use it rather than being used by it. And it was quite fascinating sort of seeing this idea and this complete bind, this complete complexity of this rule, right? Which is so fascinating, because it was like, okay, so in order to feel safe inside, I have to identify the external threat. Now, here's the thing. If there was an external threat, I would create a threat so that I'm like, there's a threat, I can identify it, now I feel safe. So this is what's so fascinating, is that I actually was so good at identifying threats, I would actually make them up to make sure that I could feel safe, which actually is presupposing that I'm not safe, right? Do you get that? It's looking outside and creating issues that aren't there in order to feel safe, because now I've identified the threat. I'm the threat. I'm the person identifying it. I'm the person making myself not feel safe, right? Threats are going to be there all the time. Crossing the road, there's a risk. There's a threat on some degree. Going out and eating dinner, like there's a risk to some degree that there's not, going to be salmonella or something like that. There's always a risk and a threat. You're always rolling the dice. And so what is super interesting around this was that I just, rather than the idea of going, hang on a sec, what would it be like not to have that, was like, fuck, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, that's probably something that I need to play around with then, because there's this rule of like, I need to feel safe, for one, and then two, that there must be a threat and I have to identify the threat, was just so fascinating. And it actually helped me, really get really personable with personal skills and learning how to meet other people and build friendships and rapport and stuff, because that way I could identify that the person wasn't a threat. It's just so fascinating. And it's like, this is why there's things that serve us, but now as I move on, that frame, that rule just simply isn't serving me in the way it did when I was younger. And also the fact that I developed with such a small worldview, and then it's, as a 29-year-old today, letting it still run my worldview would be ridiculous. It doesn't mean I have to get rid of it. I'll always have access to it, but I can expand my awareness into other areas such as external referencing. And so this is simply just an example of these rules and these frames that we run, and that's just one of mine, which means that I have multiple more, which means that we all have multiple more, that simply no longer serve us. And we're getting frustrated, we're getting pissed off, we're fucking up relationships, we're fucking up our job, we're not earning what we should be earning, all of this sort of stuff. And we're like, what the fuck's wrong with me? It's like, nothing's wrong with you. You're working perfect. Maybe it's just time to rewire. Anyway, team, that's it. I'm out. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you got a lot out of this podcast. And if you did, it'd mean the world to me if you'd share it with someone else that you think would also get a lot out of the podcast. If you share it on social media, make sure you tag me. I love to share it, and I love to say thank you. So thank you for everyone that has shared it over the last 20 episodes. It's really appreciative. Otherwise, guys, I think that's it for me today. Until tomorrow, peace and pizza. Kick today in the dick. Slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
To be everything at once, be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.